Thank you so much for joining us, Yaakov. First of all, where do we stand on the formation of this Kaleidoscope government, as you've put it? And is there a chance that the vote could be delayed?
Well, I think right now what's happening are there are negotiations between the different parties. They're talking, they're discussing and trying to iron out some of the differences to be able to reach a conclusion that would see the formation of the government, an announcement or an update to the president on Wednesday, as you mentioned, that they have found a way to form a government, right? And if that happens, then they get another week until they would have to swear in that government in the Knesset, in the Israeli parliament, with a majority against those who would try to scuttle that vote. So there still is time within this frame or window for Netanyahu and for the Likud party, which he leads, to try to torpedo what Naftali Bennett and what Yair Lapid are trying to form, which is, like you mentioned, this kaleidoscope government. It's a kaleidoscope government because it's taking parties from the right, parties from the left, parties from the center, bringing them together with support from an Israeli-era party. It's something that's never been done before in Israel. And while it sounds great on paper, like the government that all countries should want, a government that represents all parts of society, it's going to be complicated and difficult to run. And there's a lot of competing values and ideologies. That's where Netanyahu could potentially stick a foot in the middle or a wedge and try to break this party up.
That's exactly right. And one of the most concerning things is that this would be one of the widest coalitions in Israel's history. What's the most likely scenario in your view as it stands this morning? And do you believe that Netanyahu's days are numbered?
Look, Netanyahu's days are numbered for a number of reasons, right? Number one is you have this government that's coalescing and trying to come together. And despite 4 elections, a lot of his adversaries have said, we're not willing to sit with him. So even if Israel were to go to a 5th election, as it seems that Netanyahu wants, because then he would stay in office as an interim prime minister, after the 5th election, we'll be in a similar scenario, right? The numbers just aren't adding up for him to be able to get a coalition that would keep him in power and let him avoid justice. And avoiding justice is the other part of why his days are numbered, right? Don't forget, he is on trial for severe corruption charges, bribery, fraud, and breach of trust, right? That ship has sailed, that trial. Now, he would like to try to find a way to get out of it, but for now, that trial continues even as we speak, right? As we're talking, the courts in Jerusalem are convening and hearing testimony against the prime minister. So that clock is kind of ticking for him. I think what's likely is what we saw the other night with the speech by Naftali Bennett was really him crossing over to the other side. It was him basically announcing to the nation and to the world, I'm not going with Netanyahu. I'm going with Yair Lapid. I'm going with what's been called the change bloc. I'm working with them. We're going to try to put together a national unity government. The country, it was waiting to see if Bennett would make that announcement. He made that announcement. And now we're talking technicalities. Right now it's about the negotiations, who gets which portfolio, who gets which authority over which government office. It's how you divvy up the cake of ruling the government. But once you've crossed that psychological barrier of saying, I'm now with the other side, that's a whole new ballgame, and that'll be difficult for Netanyahu to stop. But again, he has shown amazing survival skills as a politician throughout his nearly 3-decade career. He's been 12 years consecutively now prime minister, 15 years if you add the 3 years that he served as prime minister in the 1990s. He has staying power, and he has a strong base and hardcore followers who have really actually escalated tensions and violence, and there's threats now against some of these politicians who are threatening to topple his and oust him from office. This story is not yet over.
Right. So, Yaakov, give me some insight into where Naftali Bennett stands on some of the key issues, like the US relationship with Israel and what he's going to do with the plight of the Palestinians, because he has been described in the past as an ultra-nationalist, someone who rejects the idea of a 2-state solution. We know that he's advocated for annexation as well in the past. And right now, it does seem like the temperature on the US relationship with Israel is changing. So how would his stance necessarily differ from Netanyahu on these critical issues, including the Iran nuclear deal, which is something we haven't spoken about either?
Right. Well, that's a lot of issues to unpack. But what I'll say is that Naftali Bennett, yes, is a ideologue, is right-wing. he believes in his ideology. On the other hand, he is a very well-known pragmatist. He's very pragmatic in the way he does things. He's a known reformer from the things that he's done when he served as Minister of Economy, when he served as Minister of Education, and even as Minister of Defense. When it comes to the Israel-U.S. relationship and that alliance, that's core in his belief of what's important for the state of Israel in fostering and building and flourishing and growing that relationship. He's a high-tech entrepreneur, something of a serial entrepreneur in the way that he's built up high-tech companies and flipped them over with a successful exit or two over the years before he entered politics. So his feet are rooted well on the ground. He understands how to work with other people, even from people across partisan lines. But to tell you that he'd be willing to forfeit his ideology, I don't think so, right? And I think, though, that what we have to realize is that this government coming together is not going to be able to make big moves. They're not going to be able to change the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but they'll be able to move forward and do small steps that can hopefully bring stability to Israel.
Right. Yaakov, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're out of time. We'll chat again soon. Yaakov Katz there from the Jerusalem Post. We're back in 2 minutes.